well, it's 7 o'clock. So I'm going to call to order the May 18th, 2020 Zionsville Plan Commission meeting. Start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Wayne, would you please take roll?
Certainly. Mr. Papa?
Present.
Mr. Lewis?
Present.
Ms. Walker?
Present.
Mr. Jones?
Present.
Mr. Fedor?
Present.
Ms. Grabanowski?
Present.
Present. All right, with that, we have a full slate of the commissioners, so 4 votes would take to pass any action. In your packet was a set of minutes from the April 20th meeting. Is there any comments, additions, deletions to those minutes?
This is the one I've got to get a bunch of work wrapped up on. I was started in on it, and there must have been something going on. Either I was mumbling or my mic was having problems, but I still owe them a bunch of changes on that.
Okay, there's quite a bit of static last month when you were speaking, so.
Yeah, I've got to figure out. And I was going to call Wayne or Janice. Is there some way I can actually listen to the recording? Can I play it back?
Yeah, get you that video link.
Okay. All right. I'll need to do that.
All right, so we'll leave those for next month then. Is that okay? Does that take a motion, Bob?
Yes, it would.
Okay, is there a
I
motion?
move that we postpone approving the minutes from last meeting until next month.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor signify by aye. Aye. Opposed by nay. Motion carries 7-0.
Bob, do we need to do that by roll call or just?
No, you can do it by consent, it's fine.
Excellent.
All right, with that, I'll let Wayne speak about some of the, process for this tonight. So Wayne, why don't you go ahead?
Thank you. With tonight's meeting being electronic, it is facilitated by Governor Eric Holcomb executive orders. And with that in mind, are there any particular attendees that are here this evening that would like their attendance noted for the record? Please do so by raising your hand or feel free to send me an email and we'll get you noted that way. Again, if you'd like to have your attendance known, please raise your hand. I see Greg Garrline, Miss Garrard, and Miss Salonis. David Politsky, apologies if I did not get your name correct. Linda Harden. Jay Strapp. Lynn Elliott. Denise Pierce. That appears to be the amount of hands that I see currently. If there's others, I'll make it known. Mr. Goodchild and K and J Minich also wish to have their attendance known. Greg Mellon. Ryan Keith.
All right. With that, we'll move on to continued business from last month. Docket number 2020-08Z, Prologis, 5190 State Road, South State Road 267, Lebanon, Indiana 46052. Petition for zone map change to rezone 76 plus or minus acres from the rural AG agricultural zoning district to the rural I-1 industry zoning district. At this point in time, it's my understanding the petitioners requested a continuance until the, I guess it's the June 15th meeting. Is there any discussion? If not, is there a motion to continue the meeting?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, Wayne, will you please take roll?
Certainly. Mr. Papa,
Aye.
Mr. Lewis,
Aye.
Ms. Walker,
Aye.
Mr. Jones,
Aye.
Mr. Fedor,
Aye.
Ms. Grabanowski,
Aye.
Mr. Franz.
Aye. So the meeting, that petition is continued to next month. Next on the docket is 2020-10Z, Windhaven, 8175 and 8775 West Oak Street. A petition for zone map change to rezone 24.283 plus or minus acres from the rural R1 residential zoning district to the PUD planned unit development zoning district. At this time, we're going to open up the hearing today. And what I want to do is give the petitioner time to make their presentation, and then allow a comparable amount of time to the remonstrators to, comment on the petitioner's presentation. At that time, I would like to turn it over to the Plan Commission for their comments, and then in all likelihood, this will be it's probably going to be continued to next month anyway, and then entertain the motion to continue at that time, if that's okay with the Plan Commission. So I think we need to have a motion to suspend the rules to allow for, and we'll ask the petitioner when he gets up how much time it's going to take for them to present. So is there a motion to suspend the rules to allow, I guess it's more than 10 minutes is what's in the ordinances.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right. Do we need a roll call on this, Bob?
Yes, you should for the suspension of the rules.
Okay. Wayne?
Certainly. Mr. Lewis,
Aye.
Ms. Walker,
Aye.
Mr. Jones,
Aye.
Mr. Fedor,
Aye.
Ms. Grabanowski,
Aye.
Mr. Franz,
Aye.
Mr. Papa.
Aye.
All right, so that motion carries 7-0. So will the petitioners please, I guess, sign on or be recognized by Wayne or Roger?
Mr. John Isaacs has been activated. Mr. Isaacs, are you there?
You're on mute.
No. Mr. Isaacs, are you there?
Here, do start video. Okay. We're here.
State your names and addresses, and then I've got a question for you.
Sure. My name is Matt Skelton, attorney with Church Hidlin Antrim, with offices at 2 North 9th Street, Noblesville, Indiana. Here with John Isaacs with MI Homes. You want to give your address?
Address 8425 Woodfield Crossing, Indianapolis, Indiana.
Okay, how long is your presentation going to take?
How long would you like it to be? We can probably keep it to 10 or 12 minutes.
I'll give you 15.
Okay.
Okay. All right, with that, go ahead, please.
Okay, sure. Yeah, just we're here this evening. It's a pleasure to be here in this kind of unconventional environment here, but it's a pleasure to be here and to share with you plans for Windhaven, a new residential community in Zionsville. It consists of 24 acres of property located on the south side of Oak Street, just east of County Road 850 East. For orientation purposes, Russell Lake subdivision is located to the east of us, and the Enclave subdivision is adjacent and abutting the property to the south and to the west. So this is essentially an infill site. As just for your, so you might recall, Cardon, a company called Cardon, petitioned for a rezoning of this property, I believe about 5 years ago, for those of you who may have been involved then. And they were met with some resistance from the neighboring community, mostly just generically due to the intensity of the development. And we've tried to tailor a compatible development that would fit on this property and work well with the surrounding uses. It is an empty nester active adult proposal. It'll be an active adult community. For those of you who have some experience with active adult communities, they're a little different than conventional subdivisions. The types of impacts that are created by a development like this are relatively low compared to conventional subdivisions. The traffic patterns are a little different because they don't have the same peak hours. They, of course, have lesser or no impact on schools, if that is important to you. But I think from a activity standpoint, the types of activities that happen within a neighborhood like this are more on the passive recreation type side of things and less on the kind of, playgrounds and kickball kind of thing. So the homes, the proposal includes 58 homes. You might be asking yourself what an empty nester home is. An empty nester home includes master suites on the main level for one level living. There are options for bonus rooms upstairs, which constitutes roughly a story and a half or a little less. We expect these homes to be in the price points of the high 300,000s to the mid 400,000s, which is pretty compatible or more expensive than the homes that are around it. One question that we've received is why did we file this as a planned unit development? And pardon me, I think we're going to have a fire department behind me, and I apologize for the noise. We filed this, the planned unit development process. I'm sorry. I'm right on Connor Street in Noblesville. We filed this, the planned unit development process lends itself very nicely for infill projects. It allows us the opportunity to develop contextually sensitive standards that can be incorporated to address very specific issues with individual owners. And that's the main reason why we selected that process. We have committed to some architectural standards already, but we did have a neighborhood meeting, which I'll talk about here a little bit more. And as a result, there are additional restrictions that we intend to heighten and incorporate. This process also provides us with some flexibility in the design, which allows us to incorporate some traffic calming measures that John Isaacs is going to cover here in a second. I mentioned the neighborhood meeting we had on May 13th. I've kind of grouped them into the comments we received into 5 categories, and I'll try to explain broadly how we intend to address them. First of all, there was a lot of general questions and requests regarding architectural requirements. And this, I think, is motivated by wanting some type of assurance that the quality of what we propose is going to be what we say it's going to be in the high 300s to mid 400 range. And so as I said, we've incorporated some architectural requirements already, but there are additional ones we can incorporate. We know what we're going to build here, and we intend to build that product. So we can narrow that down a little bit, and we intend to between now and when you see this project. We have incorporated some home elevations as representative samples of what we would be constructing within Windhaven. But we are willing to go a step further and commit to substantially building in substantial compliance with those. And so that's another change we plan to make. We received several questions about buffers and landscaping. And of course, we want more landscaping, more buffers. And so we're sharpening our pencils a little bit, and John's going to talk about his ideas for this, but we are going to try to do more. It's difficult. We're not actually platting at this point. We're at the zoning stage, but we know a lot about this site, so we're going to try to get creative. Drainage was another one, of course. That's a common comment one receives in a zoning process, but we aren't very far along. We know how the site works today, but we need to understand a little bit more about that before we can respond to some of the drainage questions that we've received. And John may talk a little bit more about that too. But we are not requesting any relief from town standards. I mean, we will comply with the town's drainage standards. So again, that's typically dealt with when kind of we're in the next phase of approvals. And then lastly, traffic impact. And so, like I said, this type of development has lesser than a normal subdivision impacts, but I think the city building commissioner has the ability to request us to perform a traffic study if we hit a certain threshold. I believe it's 150 homes, and of course, we're not anywhere close to that. We're at 58. But we have worked with the city engineer. He has requested that we incorporate a passing blister and right turn lane, and we have agreed to do so. And so future versions of our plans that you will see will include that. I think you've already covered the approval process. I just wanted to make sure everybody was fine. We're fine with the approval process that you've listed out. I mean, I think that we've received a lot of comments we'd like to be responsive to, and we hope that we get more from you folks this evening. And we'd like to take that input and then figure out what changes might make sense as a result, and then resubmit to you. With that, I think John's going to cover a little bit about the site plan and the homes themselves, and we'll go from there.
Thank you. Hopefully everyone can see. I'm shared my screen. I'm going to go through a couple slides quickly regarding the project. Just give you a little brief background. MI Homes is we'll call it somewhat of a regional builder, where we build in 15 different markets across the Midwest and South portions of the United States, and started in Columbus, Ohio as a custom home builder in 1976. We are a publicly traded company, home builder, and locally here in Indianapolis, we've been here since the late 80s, building homes. We've had some projects in Zionsville in the past, in the recent past, and generally, focused around, central Indianapolis is where we work here in our division. So I wanted to walk through kind of the project with you real quick. I'm going to go through a couple of slides that were all in the material packet that we provided. The property is, again, a little over 24 acres. It does consist of an existing horse farm area and home, and then a home owned by the Hams. There is an existing pond on the site that was created some time ago, and it does have a drainage outlet that goes towards the Russell Lake subdivision. this is the concept plan that we have come up with. And part of the reason, when you look at a PUD and the way your PUD ordinance is written, one of the first things that comes out is doing something different, like traffic calming devices and things like that. And one of the things that we have done is we're asking for one access point to the road for the 58 units. We acknowledge there has to be some safety concerns, so we do show an emergency path system that would come off of the northern cul-de-sac out to Oak Street for fire department access, and then that'll turn into a pedestrian corridor. But then we have some curvilinearness to that entry street. That's why we have the bend in it when you get to that first cul-de-sac. And then at the south end, we're asking to reduce that centerline radius. Normally you ask for a 300-foot centerline radius, and we're asking for that to be reduced to 150 feet. And in some cases, some communities will go down a little bit more, but those are all reasons to try to slow traffic down within a community and make it a little more compact feel. And then the homes that are designed, again, are all of the empty nester style. So they're all ranch homes. If they have that second story bonus room, that second story bonus room goes into and sits within the existing roof line. So there is no roof line change to the neighbors or from the streetscape. So you get that extra square footage, but there is no material look difference other than some windows on the side of the home. So one of the things that we've also looked at as far as the site design is obviously, the lake is a constraint to us or a benefit since it's there. And it is located in the lowest part of the site. So working off of that, try to utilize that as part of the amenity in the community. So you see common area around that. Both cul-de-sacs at the bottom, terminate with view vistas of that amenity. And then there would be common area adjacent to the Russell Lake side. And then we're proposing to have a landscape easement along the lots that are facing enclave. Right now, the way the plan is drawn, it shows a 30-foot drainage easement and a separate 10-foot landscape easement in the rear yard. And one of the things that we've talked about is the need for that 30-foot drainage easement. And that's something that we'll come back with our proposal and discuss. Typically, your requirements follow Boone County's and require a 30-foot wide drainage easement, whether there's a pipe or not for drainage, like for rear yards. So a lot of communities do something a little smaller than that. And if so, there might be some possibilities of generating more space for buffering and landscaping and things like that adjacent to the enclave subdivision. This is a representation of the homes that we build. There are 5 different floor plans. Each of those have 5 different elevations to them. They all have some kind of an architectural characterization to them. So this kind of gives you an idea of what we're looking at as far as the homes. And then we did write some architecture standards, some minimum standards to the perimeter of the neighborhood, to the enclave. And we will address and clean those up and make them a little more comprehensive from an architectural perspective, so that if we show a pretty picture, we're gonna have language in the ordinance that substantiates getting to that pretty picture. And that's something that we heard out of the neighborhood meetings that we had. And this is a representation of what the side and the rear might look like. The side of the house here, you can see if it has a wainscot on the bottom, and then it has a siding material. We can put siding, a different material siding that we'd carry over from the front. So this one's showing like a cedar shaped top, if that's what the front of the house had as an alternative third elevation, texture to it. And then the rear of the home, this one is showing the rear covered porch. Every home in this neighborhood would have a rear covered porch and a front covered porch as well. so that there's an area for an outside gathering space in the rear. All of them have an opportunity to convert those to a larger covered porch or patio, or a sunroom or screened-in porch. And when you do that, you start changing roof lines and things like that to the rear of the house as well. The houses are typically 40 feet wide. If they take the third car garage option, that adds 10 feet to the width of the house, so the house becomes 50 feet wide. So we have asked for a 5-foot side yard setback to be proposed in the ordinance, which is consistent with one of the rural residential districts, I believe. What that really does is allows the opportunity to add that third car garage, but it really doesn't change the living area. So the homes in the rear, part of the homes, those will still be 20-foot separation. They would have 10 foot on either side of a property line. So it's really just a streetscape issue, but at the same time, then those garages are then recessed back anywhere from 2 to 5 feet, depending on the elevation of the residence. So that I think gives kind of a general overview of the project. We did identify a handful of lots that we identified to be extra architectural requirements to the rear of the home adjacent to the perimeter to the enclave subdivision, and then certain corner lots that had visibility either on the main driveway or coming in, or maybe from the residential areas to the east. And with that, I'd take any questions that you may have, and look forward to having further discussion. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. You guys ran over a little bit, not too bad. So we'll give the remonstrators or public appropriate amount of time. So at this time, I would ask, it's my understanding that there's the remonstrators have counsel engaged. I guess we would start with that individual. Are you present, or Wayne, can you recognize her?
Melissa Garrard.
All right, so
She's vice president.
so those guys ran a little long. So to be fair, you guys got 18 minutes. So I'll let you go ahead and start.
Can I ask a question first? I got sort of disconnected there for a minute. I heard 18 minutes, and that was after the petitioners introduced themselves and gave their address and everything. So I'm hoping that we could do that. But I don't represent all of the remonstrators and some of the names that are here tonight, so I can't purport to speak on behalf of all of them. But my name is Melissa Garrard. I'm an attorney with offices at 1153 East, 150 North, Lebanon, Indiana. I represent the Enclave Homeowners Association as well as some individual residents of Enclave. I have also been asked to represent a few homeowners in Russell Lake, although I'm pending a conflict waiver from the HOA, which I expect to get. So I'm just going to assume that I'm kind of voicing some of their concerns tonight, although they did want me to let you know that some of the Russell Lakes residents are older and they're not very tech savvy, which is why they're not here tonight. And they're hoping that they get to speak with you in the June meeting about some of their concerns as well. With that said, I'll start my presentation. A PUD is not an appropriate tool for this project. The town's zoning ordinance has multiple references in it to PUDs being used for mixture of land uses, number of land uses, variety of innovative uses. And if I can share my screen here, let me see if I can do that. I want to go to the town. This is the town engineer's recommendation or comments from May 7th. And you'll see here, since the proposed land use is solely residential, it does not appear this proposed ordinance meets the intent of the PUD zoning ordinance. I have also given you a checklist in my written submissions of all the elements to be considered for a PUD. Number one, they haven't submitted a lot of the actual procedural documentary information that's required for this submission. But number two, on my checklist, you will see how they don't meet any of the substantive criteria as well. A review of the town's PUD ordinances indicates that those are used only sparingly in the town, and only on a demonstration of a compelling reason why the existing residential classifications are not practical. There is nothing innovative about this developer's project which warrants a PUD. It is not mixed use, it is not mixed density, it's one builder, it's straight up plain vanilla residential at a single density, which is 2.9 units per acre. The developer in our neighborhood meetings indicated that their product was unique because it is a community of ranch style homes. Nothing prevents them from building a ranch style community under the existing residential zone classifications. They could even achieve the smaller lot sizes they say they want to achieve using the cluster and open space provisions of the zoning ordinance. It is clear that the zoning ordinance contemplates a little something more to justify a PUD. The density and the development standards specified in this PUD are too intense as well. The surrounding land use units, and I've actually gone to the county recorder's office and calculated from the plats, are all about 1.8. They are proposing 2.4, which is about a third more dense than the existing land uses immediately adjacent, and 7 times more dense than Shannon Springs, which is in the neighborhood as well. So we don't think it meets the requirements of the comprehensive or the statutory standards because it's not compatible with the adjacent uses. And the lot sizes are pretty comparable to a lot size in the village. They're at 7,500 square feet for a lot in their PUD ordinance. The lot size in the village is 8,000 square feet, so it's actually smaller than the village lots, but it's not at all, it's half the size of Enclave and Russell Lakes lots. The petition is inconsistent with the comprehensive plan. The comprehensive plan prescribes a maximum density of 2.0 for this area. They're at 2.4, which is a substantial increase over what is prescribed by the comprehensive plan. The proposed PUD ordinance has a lot of deficiencies, which I've outlined in my written comments to the board, and I would just refer you to that for that section. I wanted to address the traffic impact study. The developer's lawyer cites the wrong standard. Your ordinance has a standard where a traffic impact study is automatically triggered. I acknowledge they do not meet the requirement for an automatic traffic study. However, the building commissioner has the discretion, not just when those criteria are met, but anytime he has the discretion to ask for a traffic impact study. We think it is particularly warranted on Oak Street because of the busy, congested nature of this road and its history of serious and even fatal accidents. The situation is only likely to deteriorate further as Whitestown and Zionsville grow and cross traffic between them increases. I'm going to go back to some of the other street design issues, comments that I have if I have time, but I want to get through some other issues. The buffer yards are very important to us. The 10-foot strip that they're proposing doesn't even meet the terms of the existing zoning standard, let alone the little something extra we would expect with a rezoning in general, but in particular a PUD, which we actually asked for a little bit more. So we've proposed an alternate buffer yard of a buffer yard I specified in the ordinance with a BW1 berm / wall, which gives them some flexibility in places. The 10-foot that they're specifying doesn't even cover the canopy of a full-grown tree. So it's nothing really. And They're proposing that it be part of the lot as opposed to common area maintained by the homeowners association, which is also a particular problem because homeowners can put their trampolines back there. They can plant their persimmon trees and their vegetable gardens back there, and lots of things that we wouldn't view as necessarily buffer yard uses consistent with common areas that are maintained by a homeowners association. So those are particular issues for us. The landscaping standards, and actually there's a lot of information that's required by the zoning ordinance that isn't addressed here. One thing I wanted to address in particular on the architectural standards, they said they're going to beef those up, and we haven't seen any details on those, although we've been asking. They're indicating that these are going to be high $300,000 to $400,000 homes. I'm just here to tell you there's no way to get to that number with what their ordinance is proposing right now. They're proposing 900 square foot houses, which is the standard on the exhibit that is the matrix to their PUD ordinance, on 7,500 square foot lots. No matter how many shutters or window trims you put on this house, that doesn't make a 900 square foot house in a 7,500 foot lot a $300,000 to $400,000 house, even in Zionsville. We really don't think that that is going to happen with the standards that they proposed in their ordinance. I really want to talk about the drainage a bit. The developer's lawyer indicates that this is a next stage issue. It is not a next stage issue. Your zoning ordinance requires them to identify the outlet, and this is section 193.055B1A, requires them to identify their outlet at the time of a change in zoning. So they have to identify their outlet now. And they have not identified an outlet. We asked them about this because it particularly affects a lot of the homeowners in Russell Lakes. The town engineer and the county surveyor are very concerned about their outlet as well. In fact, the town engineer noted in his May 7th letter on page 6 that the proposed drainage design standard may be in conflict with the town standards and the state drainage law. They have failed to identify a legal outlet as to these as required by the zoning ordinance. At the neighbors meeting last week, I asked them for detail about this. They basically blew me off and said that they think they've identified some super secret outlet that even the town engineer and the county surveyor don't know about. I asked them to tell me about it. Their response was basically, if they told me, they'd have to kill me. It's that secret. This is not the way we conduct public hearings on proposals with drainage issues. These are very important issues that these boards and the public are entitled to know about. I've also asked for their preliminary drainage calculations because the capacity of the pond at Russell Lake is in serious doubt. I mean, the county surveyor is pretty sure that it's not going to handle this drainage and that it's going to need improvements, but you guys can't specify the kinds of improvements that it's going to need until you see preliminary drainage calculations. They have not provided those either. So I think in this particular proposal, where the drainage issues are so obvious and the capacity is so much in question, that we need a little more information earlier on with this particular project that we might be able to let go until a later stage with a later project. And then I want to go back to the street design issues, the cul-de-sac variance and the second entrance. I dealt with those issues extensively on the Villa Francesca subdivision. We met every single standard of your ordinance except for the length of the cul-de-sac and the secondary entrance. We even proposed an emergency entrance similar to what the developer is proposing in connection with Villa Francesca, that would have accessed and provided a full street to the town standard that accessed through a lift station property that the town already owned. But the that was unacceptable. Both this board and the, well, it was only this board because we were already zoned. We only needed a plat approval. Refused to give approval until we redesigned the subdivision to have a full second entrance, meeting the town standards, which also had the effect of reducing the length of the cul-de-sac as well, because we were able to cut it and make an intersection. But both of those issues were the only two issues on Villa Francesca, and this board refused to approve the plat until those issues were addressed. There was no waiver for those. So that said, I'd encourage you to review my written materials. I want to leave a little bit of time for other people who might want to talk. We've given you a list of the things that we'd like to see in a development proposal, which are very bare minimum kinds of things. And basically, I drew a lot of these out of a Lebanon town ordinance. And also, we've done an analysis of the zoning standards and densities. That's Exhibit A that I've given you, and also the developer's lack of compliance with the terms that you're supposed to consider when you consider a PUD ordinance, and that's Exhibit B that I've given you. But with that said, if you don't have any questions, or I'm happy to answer any questions, but I can turn it over for other people to talk as well.
All right, thank you very much. Wayne, I would ask anybody who's in attendance if they would like to speak to raise their hand, and Wayne will recognize them. Wayne or Roger will recognize them so they can speak.
We have Joe Gregoline who would like to speak.
Okay. Just let you know we got about 6 minutes. All right.
Good evening. Sorry about that. When you promoted me, it disconnected disconnected me from the meeting for a second. I understand I have about 5 minutes.
Name and address, please. Yes.
Okay, correct. Joe Gregoline. My address is 6855 Woodhaven Place in the Enclave, lot 21.
All right. Proceed, please.
Okay, and I apologize. I'm going to view to the right here from my screen, but commissioners, good evening, and thank you for a few minutes to allow for my public comments. My name is Joe Gregoline. I'm not a Zionsville resident with my wife, Jennifer, since September 2011, when we purchased our current home. As I mentioned, I live in the Enclave, and we are located directly adjacent to the Windhaven Horse Farm. Our property shares a property line with the southern border of the Windhaven Farm. In addition, I also sit on the Enclave board and in my 5th year of serving our neighborhood. As you heard from Melissa, there are many technical issues and concerns with this petition and its related ordinance. I would recommend her extensive evaluation memo as a point of reference, but I would like to focus my comments on zoning, specifically current zoning designations against what is being proposed. I would like to start off by saying that I am not against further development on this land, but as I set forth, I would expect that any further development is consistent with the surrounding area within the current zoning classification of low density single family and consistent with comprehensive plan strategy laid out by Zionsville. I'd first like to look at the current zoning versus the PUD zoning. In 2011, when I was looking to purchase my home, knowing that I would border another property, which was not part of the Enclave, I researched the current potential zoning of the Windhaven Farm property. What I found is the land parcel in question was being used as a 15-acre horse farm for the last 15 years and was within the zoning designation of R1. My research also found that R1 is earmarked for low-density single-family housing with a density less than 1 home per 2 acres. To evaluate any potential future development of this property, I referenced the Zionsville Comprehensive Plan that calls for this parcel to be developed under low-density single-family zoning, which would be the current R1 or potentially R2 zoning. I also understood Zionsville's well-documented history of protecting against irresponsible development, including approving incompatible zoning changes. By doing this research, I understood that the property could potentially be replatted under the current low-density single-family zoning, which I was accepting of. Because of the previous mentioned research, I would not expect the zoning to change 180 degrees into an overly dense PUD. As a prospective homeowner, I evaluated all the information publicly available to me in order to protect my future investment. History shows that PUDs in Zionsville have been largely reserved for strategic, well-planned cornerstone projects that are the anchors of our community. They do not seem to be intended for random 24-acre parcels of land that look to build overly dense basic homes. In this far from certain economy, what happens if the zoning change was to be approved and the development for some reason did not happen? What if M&I chooses to sell the property once zoned PUD? This is the exact scenario that happened in M&I's Fisher's development, which Windhaven is being compared to. In that scenario, they bought land that was already zoned PUD from Pulte Homes' previously approved petition. While I understand zoning is not set in stone and zoning changes may be needed to bring essential service or explicit needs to the town, outside of these points, I should have a very high level of confidence that any proposed development on this property would stay low density and single family. Lastly, I would like to look at M&I Homes Fisher's development, which the Windhaven project is being compared to. M&I's justification of an active adult community for its overly dense PUD is not logical to me. There is nothing about this location which particularly appeals to active adults. This location is not within walking distance of any shopping amenities. It is not within walking distance of any restaurants. It does not feature any recreational facilities such as lap pools, walking trails, tennis courts, pickleball courts, or a clubhouse, all of which would be appealing to an active adult. These are very specific features someone in this demographic and market would find in the Courtyards of Zionsville, which is the Epcon development behind St. Al's. In short, there is nothing about this particular location which is uniquely suited for adult living. What M&I does plan to build or to offer are options on floor plans extending to 3,000 plus square feet, options of 4-bed, 4-bath, basements and 3-car garages. These details are per the Legacy at Hunters Run website and benchmarked within age communications with M&I on the Windhaven project. In the previously mentioned configuration, these homes will be larger than my home, and I have 3 elementary age children and a 90-pound golden retriever. This clearly is not representative of a step-down empty nester or active adult buyer. Will a small percentage of the smallest floor plans be purchased? Certainly, but I believe the majority of the buyers along with the Zionsville will align with the Zionsville demographics, which do not support this targeted buyer. In discussions with the developer and their executive summary submitted with this petition, the only attribute of their proposed subdivision that they have identified as appealing to seniors is a 1-story home with smaller yards. However, these particular attributes are equally consistent with entry-level homes for young families as well. In fact, on multiple occasions, the developer has compared this product to its Fisher's community. Indeed, when I reference the M&I website for this development, the elevations and products match exactly. On the website, in addition to touting award-winning Hamilton Southeastern District schools, they're cheering you'll be proud to be a Royal. M&I promotes this community as ranch homes, which are perfect for families, right-sizers, or even empty nesters looking to downsize. Thus, it is clear this product is marketed to young families with school-aged children, as well as the empty nester market. Moreover, if the developer's goal is to build ranch houses on smaller lots, there is no reason whatsoever why they could not achieve what they identify as their single attribute appealing empty nester demographic in the open space subdivision RSF2 zoning, which would comply with this comprehensive plan. Simply put, you do not need a PUD here, let alone one with a density that is not consistent with the comprehensive plan to build the subdivision that focuses on ranches.
All right, I'm gonna have to, I think we've got your point. We've kind of run over a little bit. Appreciate the comment, Terry. At this time, I want to let you know that we are going to have this thing next month. I mean, and I'm before we get the comments from the plan commissioners, you know, we are investigating options that will hopefully be in person, allow for more public commentary. Obviously, these are pretty unique times, and we have to figure out how to deal with them. So I just wanted to get this thing open and moving, get some questions out there, so the petitioners, you know, have some things to work on until the next month. With that, I'll turn it over to any of the Plan Commission members who have any comments or questions for the petitioner at this time.
Sure, I got a question.
right.
Regarding the buffer and the drainage easement and the lot sizes, I just want a little clarification. One of the exhibits shows kind of a typical lot of being 60 by 125. Is this 10-foot and 20-foot buffer and easement included in that 125 or in addition?
Can you hear us?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So a typical lot size would not be inclusive of those buffer yards. So if a house would fit on a lot that was 125 feet, the ones on the south are on the south end of the project are 150 feet in depth. So there's an extra 25 feet in depth of those lots there.
Wait a minute. Is it 25 or 30?
Well, it's 150 feet deep, so it's an extra 25 feet.
Okay, so where is the 10-foot buffer and where's the 20-foot drainage easement?
Let me see if I can bring up
addition.
So if you look on tab 5, where the concept plan is shown, there are, we'll focus on the southern end there. Those are lots that are 150 feet in depth. The 10 feet closest to the enclave there is the landscape easement, and then there's another 30 feet of drainage and utility easement. And then there's, you know, where the houses would fit on those lots. So the houses would be, you know, 40 feet from that southern property line with the 10-foot landscape and then a 30-foot drainage buffer is what's being shown there. Or drainage.
Well, okay. That's what's confusing because you've got another exhibit in here that shows a 20-foot front setback and a 20-foot rear setback. So where's your numbers don't add up?
Which exhibit?
Yeah, it's the drawing in the back. I think that's what we put in the front yard and rear yard setback requirements. So I think in the PUD ordinance, what we were showing is a typical lot size is 60 by 125. That's the 7,500 square feet.
That's what's back there under tab 8.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then we would be showing a front yard setback at 20 feet and a rear yard setback at 20 feet. When in reality that really the 20 feet is a function of, you can't put a house in a drainage easement.
Correct.
So, I mean, that's probably something that we can look at.
The lot depth then is from the back of sidewalk, correct? Is actually 155 feet deep. 125 plus the 20-foot drainage plus the 10-foot buffer.
Right. And some of that would be consumed in your, you know, building set, you know, your typical building setback. Yeah. I mean,
So, that's my point.
yeah, in those lots, the building setback would not be 20 feet in that location because you've got 40 feet of easement there.
So,
The houses are anywhere between 75 and 85 feet deep. That gives you the rest of the equation.
well, no, what I'm struggling with is if your lot is 125 feet deep, correct? Plus the drainage easement is 20, plus the buffer is 10. That means there's 155 feet out there in play. Which means then from the farthest point of the property, from the boundary of the property, the minimum a house would be the 50 feet off of that. 20, the 10-foot buffer, the 20-foot drainage, and then the 20-foot setback. Is that correct?
I think if you look at it on the lots that are adjacent to the enclave, which are 150 feet deep,
And is
the first 40
both the
feet
south and the
on the
west
south.
property line?
Correct. But on the south, they're 150 feet in depth. So in that case, your rear yard, your first 40 feet would be consumed between landscape and drainage easement. Then you could have a house there because you're outside of the easement. So the 20 feet there is not really, I mean, in reality, 20 feet in a rear yard doesn't really make sense because you're always going to have a drainage easement in your rear yard. I think your requirements require drainage easements around all rear yards, I believe.
Is anybody else understanding my question? My question is the buffer and the drainage easement, the 10-foot buffer, the 20-foot drainage, separate from the actual lot size?
No. Those lots are bigger.
So what you're saying is that the buffer and the drainage easement are part of the lot.
They're on the rear, yeah. That's correct.
Then when you establish the rear setback line, what are you going to use?
Well, it's going to be the greater of the distance of the setback or any easements that are in the way. It's a minimum of 20 feet, but if you've got a 40 feet worth of easement, it deflects to 40 feet.
All right. The most easement you're committing to is 30 feet.
The drawing that is there shows, where are you getting that information from?
It's what you're telling me.
There's a 10-foot landscape easement.
Once again, the drawings that I provided don't have enough definition that we can determine this. That's why I'm asking the question.
Well, that one that's shown as typical lot layout, that's a minimum. That's just to show how a typical house would fit on a typical size lot. The ones at the bottom are not your typical size lot because they're greater in size to accommodate those easements at the bottom.
Larry, are you on 196?
Am I on what?
Are you on? I'm looking on my desktop, and on 196 is the drawing. Is that what you're taking your information from?
I'm on drawing. It's under tab 6 in their package right now.
All right, I'm past the tabs. I was just looking at the page number. Thanks.
Yeah, let me go down to 196 and see what's down there.
Well, I just need to go up farther.
Well, hang on. It might be the same thing.
They're similar.
They're similar. So once again, it's the same thing. So they've got a 10-foot landscape easement around the perimeter of the entire parcel, and then they've got a 20-foot drainage. So Sharon, my question is, see where it turns from gray to yellow?
Yep.
Does the yellow begin the 125 foot?
I see what you're saying.
And what they've come back around and said is that from the street, from the green,
yeah,
the rear edge of the property, they're allocating 155 feet,
right,
of which they're going to take 10 foot and make it buffer, 20 feet drainage, which leaves a net of 125. So now my next question is, where is the rear building setback? My concern is, the way it's getting explained to me, is that then they can then build right back to the edge of the drainage easement, which would be, if you take the 20-foot drainage easement plus a 10-foot buffer, it would be 30 feet off the edge of the entire parcel.
right. I see.
And that's what I'm wanting clarity on. What are we seeing here?
Can you hear us? I think
If you work from the front yard and you've got the 20-foot setback in the front yard and the 85-foot house, the house would end at 105 feet on the lot. So with that situation, they'd have 40 feet back to the backyard, the back line of the lot. So if it's 10-foot buffer, I hear 20 or 30-foot drainage easement. I mean, there'd be either 10 or 20 feet between the easement and the back of the house, based on my calculations.
That's correct.
So there's 20 feet between the easement and the back of the house.
I think we can prepare something that is a little more, we can bring you something that'll demonstrate that a little better when we come back.
Yeah, I mean, that's
not very much behind there at all, behind the house, what, 20 feet?
It's 40 feet. It would be, the house would be at least 40 feet from the rear property line
Okay.
on the
so
south side.
Fix that.
and Sharon, what I find interesting in this is if you look up there at Bainbridge Circle, those 4 houses up there at the top,
Uh-huh.
they're even closer to the property line than what we're discussing right now.
Yep, they sure
So
are.
my piece I want to get adequately addressed in this is there's a lot of conversation about density and number of units on this. And I want to make sure there's a little bit of clarity as to exactly where houses are going to sit on the property and what's the amount of buffer and drainage easement, and then how far back the property sits. So the MI folks, you guys need to provide some better documentation because you're not helping your situation at all.
We can do that.
And I don't think that's probably the same question the neighbors are having, so. Anyway, that's all, I mean, let's see, what was that? Oh, the other question is the remaining property on Oak Street. There's one house that you're not purchasing, but then there's a certain amount of land that you are. Do you have a future plan for that?
All that area that's green on that would be part of the open space for the neighborhood, common area.
And that'll be part of the commitments for the HUD?
Correct. And there are some landscape standards that we have drafted that we do some mounding and stuff along Oak Street, and that would probably carry around to the side of that house on both sides.
Okay. The other question is about, then if we're going to keep on this, what is the answer to the off-site drainage connection?
So currently there's a pond on site. There's an outlet pipe that extends from that pond through a pipe that goes to the south east into the Russell Lake subdivision that goes into a storm sewer of the Russell Lake subdivision. And then I just presume that carries on to Russell Lake. That appears to be what the normal drainage pattern is for the property to exit. So that, that would be the positive outlet. The question is that pipe in an easement? Does it need to have an easement? Does that easement need to be 30 feet because it becomes part of the county surveyor requirement? So we're reviewing that, now.
I mean, that will tie in to be part of the requirements to meet the drainage, correct, for the project?
Yeah, I mean, that's where the drainage today leaves the site. So it needs to be accommodated for it to leave the site in that direction through that existing pond. That's where, so yeah, that'll be part of the drainage
once
caps.
again, the existing parcel doesn't have 58 homes on it, does it?
No,
So that's the point, and that's, I think, the point of Ms. Garrard's comments is this getting adequately addressed?
So from a drainage perspective, there's a flow rate that leaves the site in the current state. The post-development site, the water cannot leave the site at any greater rate than it does today.
Right.
You understand that?
All right.
I seem to recall with the Cardon PUD, the drainage down on Russell Lake was a major issue And as part of that PUD development, several of you were on the board or the commission at that time. I believe Cardon was making some commitments to work with some additional drainage features to resolve some of those downstream issues on Russell Lake. I would advise taking a look at the old minutes to see if that is the situation. At least that's the way I recall it.
I
I remember
agree.
that was a big issue to the Russell Lake people.
Dave, I'd agree. That was part of the conversation. The Cardon folks had started or had worked through some upgrades to whatever that off-site drainage route is.
Does anybody else on the commission have questions, comments?
I have one. I was wondering if they could clarify what they said either now or at the next meeting about traffic. And I realize they're under the 150 unit limit to have to provide a traffic study. I'm not even necessarily talking about capacity, but more from a safety perspective. It looks awfully close to Cooper Road and north-south connector to be coming out of it. I'm not saying it's impossible, but I don't know if I wasn't clear on what had been said about that earlier in the meeting. They talked about a acceleration, deceleration blister, but was there anything else on that?
So far, that's the recommendation that we've received from the town engineer is that a passing blister and right turn lane should be added to the main entrance on Oak Street. There's been no further discussion about any other safety concerns that have been brought up, but that's, I'm sure we'll have some more conversations with the town engineer. And we can address that.
I just keep trying to picture a left turn coming out of there when the north-south connector is in place, but thanks.
So my question is, we seem to be somewhere between R2 and R3 zoning. If you look at the tables that were provided by Ms. Garrard, what is it about those zoning classifications that this development doesn't meet and necessitates doing the PUD rather than trying to fit into one of our existing zoning classifications?
I mean, you're probably right. R3 might be a classification that most of the standards that we've drafted for the PUD would meet. One of the things that the PUD does that the straight zoning does not is we have a plan, it's before you today, and we're showing you what elements of the subdivision control code requirements are not being met. For instance, I talked about the centerline radius at the bottom, where we're asking for reduction to 150 feet. In a PUD, that's something that can be contemplated at the time of zoning, so that when we go forward, there's no variances or waivers to be sought after at a later date. So the drawing as proposed is what can be built. A lot of times, if we show this plan and then later we come back and say, well, we don't meet X, Y, and Z of your subdivision control code requirement, then we're dealing with a subdivision waiver. And now you're a lot farther down the line on a site that is somewhat of an infill site. It has some unique characteristics to it. It's got no ability to connect to the adjacent neighborhood, so there's no secondary access point. The existing lake that's already there, and with the sewer coming out along Oak Street, it changes the dynamic of this area and of this site. And we felt that the PUD lays out all the questions up front, and therefore commitments can be made. We can add language regarding landscape buffering. We can add things like architecture to the homes that are not a commitment that's separate from an ordinance, but it's part of the ordinance that's now enforceable fully by the town staff, plan commission, town council.
In the planned unit development, process, I mean, that's a planning process, and that's why we wanted to pursue it with the Plan Commission. I mean, you can rezone a piece of property and then end up with, as John said, either waivers or appeals, and that kind of piecemeals the whole planning exercise. The idea is to craft a good project, and then this vessel efficiently lets us work with you to solidify the requirements that caused this project to be approved. It's this project, and actually, I think there was one comment made during the public comment about wanting assurances. You know, what happens if MI, you know, walks away? Well, this property needs to be built the way this PUD is outlined, and that will include home elevations. So somebody would have to come back to you and request to modify the PUD in order to build something else. That's our intent.
Yeah, Wayne, that's the way our PUD ordinance would work, is that once a planned urban development approved for a project, it's basically committed to build that project. It's not like zoning where you've rezoned a property from something to something and now it's entitled to be something as long as it meets the standards of that zoning class. What he's talking about is when you establish a PUD with these specific requirements, then that's specifically what they've got to build, correct?
Correct, Mr. Jones.
Does anybody else have comment, questions? Guess I'd like to say something. When we had the Cardon PUD request in front of us, you know, I remember this very clearly. I asked the remonstrators what would go in this area, and they said a subdivision. And, you know, where I struggle, to be perfectly honest, with the PUD is while arguably it's a subdivision, you know, my guess is they were thinking they would be more like an R2, RSF2 type subdivision with comparable density to the properties that surround them. You know, you know, that's my thought. And I'm as, you know, for development of this property. I'll say that. I was disappointed that Cardon didn't pass, but, you know, that's water under the bridge. But now I clearly see where the remonstrators are standing on this. Yeah, they're for a subdivision, but is this really the subdivision that they thought would be being placed in this piece of property? Does anybody else have any comments or questions? All right, so next month, obviously we're going to vote to continue this here in a minute. So obviously you've got hopefully you've taken a lot of notes, prepared to answer. The remonstrators next month will give you the opportunity to talk again also. So we'll go through the rebuttal process at that time. Hopefully we'll be in a situation where we can have, you know, more time to some of the remonstrators in person. Hopefully we'll see how that goes. So at this point in time, unless there's any further questions or comments, I would entertain a motion to continue this to the June 15th meeting.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, Wayne, would you take roll, please?
Certainly. Ms. Walker?
Aye.
Mr. Jones?
Aye.
Mr. Fedor?
Aye.
Ms. Grabanowski?
Aye.
Mr. Franz?
Aye.
Jeff Papa?
Aye.
George Lewis?
Aye.
Motion carries 7-0. So we will look forward to, one way or another, opening this thing back up next month. So thanks a lot, everybody. We'll see you then.
Thank you for your time.
All right, at this time, we'll move on to the next items on the agenda. New business, docket number 2020-15Z, Creekside PUD, 10771 to 10903 Creekway. Petition for zone map change to rezone 48 49.874 plus or minus acres from the PUD planned unit development to a PUD planned unit development district, town of Zionsville owned land within the Creekside PUD as per ordinance 2018-08. Petitioner present. Wayne, are
sir.
you handling this?
I am handling this. That is correct. And thank you for the opportunity to present this petition to you. Certainly this project is under no particular time frame, but certainly proposed in front of you is a rezone of the Creekside Corporate Park. This process itself is designed and intended to adjust the language that's currently contained in the PUD ordinance. You've seen this type of petition a few times. An alternative to this process would be to file a variance that's site-specific to a particular project. However, a lot has happened in the last 18 months or so to impact Creekside, and so this is an effort to clean up and modify the zoning to enhance its Creekside's presence in the marketplace. As outlined in your staff report, there's a few changes that are suggested. One is related to wall signage for larger uses. The major driver of this conversation is the land use that is proposed being an automobile racing team. When Creekside was created, certainly big box, warehouse distribution, other types of land uses were not contemplated as part of the fabric. However, that prohibition would also not allow the entertainment of or consideration of an automobile racing team whose footprint is of generally a large building with a warehouse type component, but it's a very specific space for a very specific land use. With that concept in mind, that's what's in front of you this evening. There are a few other changes that are also proposed within the document as listed in your staff report. The zoning itself also looks to reflect the reduction in the footprint of Creekside Corporate Park of just a very small amount of acreage. A remnant piece of right-of-way was sold off to an adjacent landowner for their use. Acreage was transferred and ownership to your Community Development Corporation, who is moving on to be the steward of the common areas as well as maintenance of the trail system and moving forward in that fashion. So pausing here, we did provide notice as required by your Rules of Procedure in Indiana Code. The town did provide first-class notice to adjoining landowners. We did reach out as well to parties to have additional communications, but we would also the staff would respectfully ask a waiver of your notice requirements from your Rules of Procedure to allow for the consideration of first-class mailing, and that was done, as we mentioned early on in tonight's meeting, to allow for reductions in contact with postal carriers and for enhancement of social distancing. With that, I will pause here with the presentation as to the petition that's in front of you.
All right, thank you, Wayne. Bob, should we address the waiver first? Is that a motion?
Yes, you should, and it should be a motion with a roll call vote as it is a waiver of the rules.
Okay, so we need, so is there a motion to waive the registered mail in-person notification for first-class mail? Is there a motion? Is there a second?
Second.
All right, Wayne, roll call, please.
Certainly. Starting with Mr. Jones.
Aye.
Mr. Figor.
Aye.
Ms. Grabanowski.
Aye.
Mr. Franz.
Aye.
Mr. Papa.
Aye.
Mr. Lewis.
Aye.
Ms. Walker.
Aye.
Motion carries 7-0. With that, I'll open this up for the members of the Planning Commission for any questions, comments.
Well, my question would be, so when it came to, I'm looking under the permitted uses where we've added automotive racing team. What, and it says under accessory uses, we've got percentages of floor space for various where did they fall? Are they considered a manufacturer or assembly or?
It would be the land use itself. Yeah, I mean, we did not actually, to answer your question, we did not actually classify them as their automobile racing team component as accessory use. Their accessory use is actually their office. The building footprint is 75% warehouse and 25% office. So the accessory component, if you will, of an automobile racing team is their office operations.
Hmm.
Wayne, before I go any further, I think I forgot to ask if there's any public comment on this matter. So if there's anybody in attendees who'd like to comment on this, please raise your hand to be recognized. Sorry about that.
Mr. Franz, there are no hands raised.
Okay, so continue on with the questioning comments.
Is this similar to what some of the buildings down on Northfield Drive in Brownsburg are? Or is?
I would say from a land use standpoint, yes. From the architectural point of view, I would say it would be a departure.
Okay.
The Creekside Corporate Park has a pretty strong standard that's been established by the first use that was on the south side of the road, and then certainly the tenant that's within the north side of the park, DK Pierce. Certainly that the bar, as we've said repeatedly, is rather high, and the expectation of the town, the redevelopment commission, the mayor's office, and the CDC would be to keep that bar pretty high. And certainly the plan commission in the near future would have an opportunity as well to review the drawings that would be provided as part of the development plan process.
Thank you. That's the kind of answer I was hoping to get.
Very good.
Is there anybody else who have any comments, questions on this one? If not, is there a motion to forward this to the town council with a favorable recommendation?
I move the docket number 2020-15-Z to modify to rezone 49.874 plus or minus acres from the planned unit development to a planned unit development district, Town of Zionsville owned land within the Creekside PUD, as per ordinance 2018-08. Receive a favorable recommendation based upon the findings in the staff report as presented, with the recommendation being certified to the town council for adoption or rejection.
Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any comments before we take roll? None. Wayne, would you please take roll?
Mr. Fedor? Aye. Ms. Grabanowski?
Aye.
Mr. Franz?
Aye.
Mr. Papa?
Aye.
Mr. Lewis?
Aye.
Walker?
Aye.
Mr. Jones?
Aye.
Motion carries 7-0, so that will go to the town council. Thank you, Wayne. Next on the docket is (2020-13) DP, Zionsville Community Schools Building Corporation, 4400 South 875 East. Petition for development plan approval to allow for the construction of a 91,151 square foot elementary school in the SU1 special use zoning district. Our petitioner present, please raise your hand and be recognized.
Yes, I'm here.
Proceed, please.
Good evening. I'm Chuck Tyler, a senior architect with Fanning Howey Associates with offices at 350 East New York, Indianapolis, and my residence is 7612 Beekman Terrace, Zionsville. Fanning Howie Associates is the architectural firm that has been working now for a number of years with the Zionsville Community School System. Unseen, but here with me, representing Zionsville Community Schools is Scott Robison, Superintendent, Rebecca Kaufman, Assistant Superintendent, Mike Schaefer, Chief Financial Officer, legal counsel with Church, Hiddle, and Antrim, includes Andrew Manna, John Becker, and Andrew Wirt. My civil engineer, Brittany Heidenreich with TLF, is on as well. And our construction manager, the Skillman Corporation, is represented by Victor Landfair. On behalf of Zionsville Community Schools, we've submitted the development plan for your consideration for the 67 acres at 4400 South County Road, 875 East. This is just north of the existing high school baseball softball complex. The property is currently zoned Special Use 1. This project is one of the cornerstones of the facility plan taken to the community in November of 2019. It is a significant part of the $89 million referendum supported by 80% of the voters in the district. The new elementary school is a replication of Union Elementary School, which has been a very successful design for the district. It provides a capacity of 650 students in grades pre-K through 4. The central location of this school and this property within the district will allow Zionsville Community Schools to take the capacity pressures off several of its buildings in the face of continued growth. The acreage as well gives Zionsville Community Schools the ability to construct a future building on this campus. That is not a part of this submission. However, it is worth noting that the infrastructure, utilities, drives, and drainage has been taken into account for some future facility. On the drainage front, I'd like to update the commission. We've been working very hard to both meet the requirements of the town and of Boone County. We were in fact on the docket for the county's drainage board this morning and have received a conditional drainage approval from the county drainage board. A portion of this project represents the continued cooperation between Zionsville Community Schools and the town of Zionsville. The north entrance drive off of 875 East will be constructed as a part of the elementary school project on an easement provided by the town. The design of this drive meets the needs of the school campus while also providing access to the future town development on this property. Staff has effectively summarized how the project intends to meet the applicable provisions of the zoning requirements. Additionally, there are commitments from Zionsville Community Schools regarding future improvements to provide pedestrian and emergency vehicle connectivity to this site. Public notifications were delivered via first-class mail for the same reasons that Wayne outlined prior to in your prior item. It was also then advertised in the Zionsville Times Sentinel. Conversations continue with the immediate property owners with regard to the entrance improvements on 875 East. Zionsville Community Schools and the project team are here to answer any questions that you might have at this time.
Thank you very much. At this point in time, is there any comments from the public on this matter?
Mr. Franz, there are no hands raised.
All right, so we'll first take a motion to allow for the notice using first-class mail. Is there a motion to do so?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Wayne, would you please take roll?
Certainly. Ms. Grabanowski,
Aye.
Mr. Franz,
Aye.
Mr. Papa,
Aye.
Mr. Lewis,
Aye.
Ms. Walker,
Aye.
Mr. Jones,
Aye.
Mr. Fedor.
Aye.
All right, motion carries 7-0. With that, staff report, please.
Certainly, the petitioner has certainly very eloquently identified the topics that staff would focus on. This project was recently visited with the Drainage Board, specific to the legal drain that is in proximity to the site. Certainly much detail has been reviewed and certainly been available to the public over the last decade related to the interests of the school in developing this facility. This represents an additional investment in the community, as well as outlines future investments that will be made and certainly be subject to Plan Commission review at that time. Access to the site is derived from multiple locations, with a second curb cut being provided on County Road 875. Certainly this roadway cut would be provided through a piece of property which the town is purchasing under contract, and all parties involved in the transaction are willing sellers and conveyors of that easement. Staff's comments are rather brief, even though your staff report is rather voluminous, but in summary, staff is supportive of the petition as it's been filed. It would be a conditional approval subject to finalizing items prior to commencement and seeking up a permit to disturb earth.
All right, thank you, Wayne. At this point, is there any questions, comments from any members of the commission?
Looking at the site plan, are there any plans to potentially have a trail that links to the properties to the west that will probably be going to this school? I don't really see one on there, and it's kind of nice. My kids go to Pleasant View, and we used to be able to go off the trail to get to the school.
So the properties to the west do have a trail or sidewalk extension sort of in the northeast portion of their development. One of the commitments is to connect to that in the future phase of this project at the time that we develop our drive connection to 400 South.
Anybody else? There's no additional comments. Is there a motion?
No, I'll make it, I guess. Get it blowing up so I can read it.
That's what I was doing.
Well, I know, it's just, hang on, where are we at?
Hard to find this stuff.
Larry, I've got a hard copy, thanks to Janice. Do you want me to do it?
Please.
Okay. I move that docket number 2020-13-DP to allow for the construction of a 91,151 square foot elementary school in the SU-1 special use zoning district be approved based on the findings in the staff report, staff recommendation, and submitted findings as presented.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? None. Wayne, roll call, please.
Mr. Franz,
Aye.
Mr. Papa,
Aye.
Mr. Lewis,
Aye.
Ms. Walker,
Aye.
Mr. Jones,
Aye.
Mr. Fedor,
Aye.
Ms. Grabanowski.
Aye.
All right, with that, motion carries 7-0. So,
Thank you very much.
all right, thank you. Next item on the docket is, now I have to expand it. 2020-14 DP, Hoosier Village Sales and Marketing Office, 5415 Beerberry Lane. Petition for development plan approval to allow for the construction of an approximately 5,600 square foot single-story sales and marketing office in the SU7 Special Use Zoning District. Is the petitioner present? I think you're on mute. I didn't hear you.
Oh,
There you are. Okay.
here I am. Yes, Tim Oakes, attorney at Ice Miller, representing the petitioner, BHI Senior Living. This is a proposal for a new building on the Hoosier Village campus. Just a short background, and for those members of the Plan Commission that have heard several petitions, my apologies for any repetition. But this is part of a much, much larger continuing care retirement community that's been part of the Zionsville community for decades. The Hoosier Village campus is located northeast of Zionsville and 96th Street, also northeast of 465. This particular proposal is for a new 5,600 square foot sales and marketing office. Its location, and if you look at page 5 of the staff report, it shows exactly where this building would be located with a little white box that says site. It's located on the interior of the campus, pretty much due east of what's now the main or new entrance off of Zionsville Road. It's located far enough east of Zionsville Road and north of 96th Street that it really won't be visible from the exterior of the larger Hoosier Village campus. Nonetheless, the architecture and feel is of significant importance to BHI, and we think that the architecture and the aesthetics reflect that. It's a single-story building. It will share a parking lot with the existing community center that's located due north of it. The parking lot will be located in between the two buildings. There is adequate parking to meet the parking requirements specified in the zoning ordinance without counting any spaces more than once in that parking lot. There'll be sidewalks on 3 sides. The only side that doesn't have it is the west side, and there's no point in anybody going on the west side of the building. That will include an 8-foot path on the south side that runs along one of the drives within Hoosier Village. All of the roads in Hoosier Village are private. We're not aware of, and we've pretty much completed our drainage plan when about almost 10 years ago now, when improvements were really starting on the campus. The master drainage plan was done with the notion that there might be additions in the future. So the drainage was contemplated, so that's not an issue. No signage is being proposed. There's no point in that since you can't really see it from the surrounding roadway. Finally, just a comment as to why this is necessary. Up until now, the sales and marketing efforts have occurred in the buildings where residents actually stay. There would be a dedicated office space or a dedicated unit for these purposes. And what has occurred over the last 5 years is a significant increase in the number of residents because Hoosier Village is growing. They're about to come online with a new large multi-unit building that was part of a prior development plan approval. The Oaks project, which is just adjacent to but north of the traditional Hoosier Village campus, has brought on a lot of new units. And what's happening is they need to add a couple more staff people, and they need to be able to conduct this in a way that they're not interfering with their residents and the everyday function of their residents. And the residents, quite frankly, then aren't interfering with the sales and marketing folks. It just makes sense to have their own facility. So this is being proposed. It's a single-story pitched asphalt roof, predominantly masonry construction, well landscaped. I'd like to thank staff for their work. We're in agreement with the staff report and would be happy to answer any question that Plan Commission might have.
All right, thank you. At this time, is there any public comment on this matter? Being none.
Hands raised.
Pardon?
There are no hands raised.
Okay, all right. Mr. Oakes, did you also need a waiver for the notice?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. At this point, I'll entertain a motion for a waiver to allow the use of first-class mail for notice.
So moved.
Oh,
Is there a second?
second.
Wayne, would you please take a roll?
Certainly. Mr. Papa?
Aye.
Mr. Lewis?
Aye.
Mr. Jones?
Aye.
Ms. Walker?
Aye.
Mr. Fedor?
Aye.
Ms. Grabanowski?
Aye.
Mr. Franz?
Aye. Okay, motion carries 7-0. With that, I'll open it up to questions from any of the members of the commission.
I don't have a question, but in light of the pandemic, I think this is an excellent, much needed, given the vulnerability of people in nursing homes, having a separate facility is spot on.
Thank you.
I don't see any floor plan in here. Does this thing have like, are we seeing a area for like golf carts? Is that what that little kind of garage drive is?
Yes, that's what it is. Correct.
Are they not setting up a garage in there? They're going to do auto repair, correct?
And I don't believe that's on the agenda.
Okay.
Anybody else have any questions, comments? If not, is there a motion?
I don't have my hard copy with me, guys. One of you has to do it.
Okay, I've got a hard copy on this one. I believe I do. I move at docket 2020-14-BP to allow for the construction of an approximate 5,600 square foot single-story sales and marketing office in the SU7 Special-Use Zoning District be approved based on the findings and fact in the staff report and submitted as presented.
And
is there a second?
Second.
Mr. President, for your process, you did not have the staff report read. Staff is not offended by your staff is supportive of as filed. Please continue with your motion.
Sorry about that, Wayne. Okay, so there was a second.
Yes.
All right, is there any discussion? All right, with that, Wayne, would you please take roll?
Certainly. Mr. Lewis?
Aye.
Ms. Walker?
Aye.
Jones?
Aye.
Mr. Fedor?
Aye.
Ms. Grabanowski?
Aye.
Mr. Franz?
Aye.
Mr. Papa?
Aye.
Motion carries 7-0. Thank you, Mr. Oakes.
Thank you.
All right. At this point, there's no other matters on the agenda. Is there any comments? Anything somebody wants to discuss? I will add. Go ahead.
I had a question for you, Wayne. With the Zionsville paper and Lebanon Reporter merging, are we going to require notice in the Lebanon Reporter now? Is that going to be the procedure, or?
No board or commission sets as to which newspaper must be utilized. The paper, as long as the paper is a paper of general circulation and maintains that certification that the newspaper, that particular publication is eligible. So the current and other newspapers, such as the ones you mentioned, no matter where they circulate, as long as they're a paper of general circulation inside Boone County, that's acceptable for a petitioner to utilize. Certainly, Mr. Clutter, was there any?
That's correct. That's all established by state statute. They've been under common ownership for quite a period of time. I was not aware, is the Zionsville paper going to stop circulation?
Yes.
Yeah.
Completely stop? Okay.
Last week was the last issue.
I didn't realize that.
Got to be combined with.
Yeah, I knew, and I know the Lebanon Reporter said that they were dropping circulation. I think they're only going to be
Like
3 days a week now. So I was not aware the Zionsville was completely stopping circulation. So yeah, the Lebanon Reporter will be the paper of circulation in Boone County. I know that there are exceptions, and the outlying counties generally will rely upon publication in the Indianapolis Star. That's not provided by state statute, but there can be an exception for that.
All right. Related to next month's continued matter, we were talking about earlier, Wayne, trying to find a space to accommodate a larger group of people, because currently, if the town hall is open, the concern would be if there's social distancing in place, the number of people who could attend the meeting would be severely limited. Is that, I mean, that you're saying there was like 30 people, right?
Correct. For example, the plan commission in the council chambers downstairs, the first floor of the town hall, there's X number of chairs that are out, plus your dais with essential staff, plus the board itself or commissions. You would end up with a limited number of potential participants, attendees. So it would, looking at your petitioner and how many is in that grouping, then it's potentially reduces down the amount of parties that could attend a meeting to cure their interests.
All right. I would ask potentially if there's any way you could research alternatives to allow for a larger group, because I think obviously there's a lot of interest in this matter.
Yeah, certainly we're happy to do that. I would say that the town, through its town attorney, will be researching just collectively how this marches forward in June, certainly depending on the governor's extension of any executive order. Certainly the staff is not here tonight to pontificate on if that would occur or not. These are happening in 30-day increments, but certainly we need to be prepared one way or the other with contingency plans to be prepared to facilitate full and transparent public processes.
Right. Anybody, anything else? If not, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
We don't need roll. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All right. Thanks a lot, guys. Good night.
All right. Good night. Thank you.
Thank you.